Hello everyone, I'm Matthew Taylor, I'm the RSA's Chief Executive. It's my great pleasure to welcome you here for this evening's special event. Could you make sure your mobile phone is switched to silent? We're filming the event for posterity and we're also live streaming over the RSA website, so welcome to our online viewers. The hashtag for tonight's event is RSA Cruddas, if you want to get involved in the discussion on Twitter. Now, housekeeping notice is over. It's my great pleasure to introduce tonight's event. As part of our contribution to public debate ahead of next year's general election, the RSA is inviting key politicians from the main political parties to think about the future, and particularly how radical change in society and technology might change the way we think about politics, policy and social change. This links to the RSA's own emerging worldview, The Power to Create, which will be the focus of my annual lecture next week. I'm delighted that we're starting that series of talks about the future with John Cruddas MP. John is head of Labour's Policy Review and a member of the Shadow Cabinet. He's been a member of Parliament since 2001, first for Dagenham and then for Dagenham and Rainham. The structure for today's session is that John will speak for around 20-25 minutes. I'm going to ask him 2 or 3 questions, and then we'll open up to questions from the floor, and we'll finish promptly at 7:30 p.m. So without further ado, please join me in welcoming John Cruddas.
Thank you very much. Good evening, everybody. Thanks, Matthew, for the invitation to speak this evening. Not least because the RSA is the correct place to take a longer view of the Labour Party, of government, and the future of our country. I should say, as an aside, before I start, actually, anyone covertly recording this for Tory Central Office can have a night off, because it is being live streamed. So you can stand down now. I'll begin with a story. My long-term collaborator and friend, Jonathan Rutherford, and I have a favourite book, which tells a story, really, about the Crow Indians. It's a book by the fantastic American philosopher, Jonathan Lear, from Chicago. It's called Radical Hope, Ethics in the Face of Cultural Devastation. It's a story about what happens when the economy of a society is destroyed and people's way of life literally comes to an end. It was told by their great chief, Plenty Coups, shortly before he died. He told an anthropologist his tribe's story. And he said, and I always like this quote, he said, "When the buffalo went away, the hearts of my people fell to the ground, and they could not be lifted up again. After this, nothing happened." After this, nothing happened. What did he mean by that? The culture that gave life meaning and purpose had died. The whole fabric of their belief system and standards was destroyed, and that loss was literally irreparable. What could come next after that? Actually, the Crow Indian did survive despite this loss because their leadership reimagined their future, reimagined their role. It created a radical hope for the future. It was radical because it was a future that without guarantees, and most important, it was without despair. So it wasn't a messianic form of leadership. It wasn't a desperate form of leadership. It was a radical form built on hope. And in a period of rapid social and economic change, it raises key questions about how we draw on a community's memory and traditions to define the future. The book draws up many challenges for all today's political parties. For example, the Labour Party is the product of industrial society, a party built on mass production over 100 years ago, a large, stable workforce, large production units, mass consumption, and a class society. Yet we are now in the middle of a deindustrialising revolution, fragmenting the communities we once sought to sustain. A post-industrial economy is taking shape around our advanced manufacturing and the new information and communication technologies. The shift to a service economy is flattening out old hierarchical command and control structures. Digital technology is unseating whole industries and workforces, and production is becoming more networked and disorganized. Our class system is being reconstituted. The disruption of technological change is greater than at any time since the Industrial Revolution. So the institutions and solidarities workers created to defend themselves against their dispossession, against the power of capital, have disappeared or become outdated and ineffective. As such, social democracy has lost its social anchorage in the coalitions built up around the skilled working class. Once great ruling parties can appear hollowed out, in danger of shrinking into a professionalised political class. Moreover, Often in government, they were not very social nor very democratic. Top-down, state-driven, compensating for the system, not reforming it. A politics about structures and not about individuals. Arguably, this model of social democracy was built in the industrial era, but has come to the end of its useful life. But these forces also challenge the Tories as well, and their traditional conservative values. The dominant force over the last 30 years has been an ideology of neoclassical economics, arguably since the 1870s actually, or neoliberalism. Its market fundamentalism has driven growth, and its destructive impact is now increasingly understood. A centralising and authoritarian state, an economy driven by individual greed, a culture of personal entitlement at the expense of a sense of obligation and duty to others, public goods commodified, communities fragmented, and our democracy weakened. And we're now living with the shakedown, with the consequences, the biggest bank bailout in our history, the slowest recovery, and the link between economic growth and rising living standards broken. Huge wealth for a few, whilst wages for the majority have been stagnant for years. Homes for ordinary families are not being built, and the skills training which business and young people need to succeed is inadequate. People's talent is wasted in dead-end jobs. There's not enough quality childcare to help women earn. The care system for the elderly is turning into a social catastrophe. Cumulatively, in 2015, George Osborne will leave the country with a deficit close to 70 billion and the national debt still rising. So here's one blindingly obvious paradox to start with. Despite the failure of the old order, we're also living in a time of tremendous opportunity. As the economy recovers, people want the opportunity to use their skills and talents to make a better life for themselves and their children. There's fantastic energy and willingness to create and to build and to turn Britain around. So, is there not two future stories taking shape in our country today? The first is the future of innovation and wealth creation. We are just at the start of the internet revolution. Radical innovations in the generation, processing and transmission of information will continue modernising the whole base of our economy. New services, products and markets will mean more knowledge, prosperity and opportunity. The web is breaking down barriers. Digital technologies have transformed start-up costs, and it's never been easier to start and run your own business. For example, new platforms like Etsy are opening up global markets to small businesses and the self-employed. Kickstarter provides crowdsourcing for inventors of every kind. And Unbound brings together potential investors and authors to create subscription finance publications. New creative cultures will generate economic wealth and deepen and enrich our experience of everyday life, expanding the sphere of human freedom and expression. Cities were at the centre of the first industrial revolution, with Manchester literally the first modern city. They will drive the new economic revolution across the world. In Britain, our cities will accelerate the forces of economic development, with better infrastructure and digital connectivity and good skills and employment strategies. They will play to the creative strengths of the people. But without radical reform to our economy, this future will only belong to the few. There is a second future taking up shape in the shadow of this first one. A country scarred by dispossession. Its great industries gone, and with them, the skilled jobs and communities of the working class. People driven from secure full-time work into precarious, badly paid jobs. Poverty and inequality increasing, especially amongst the under-30s. Public services standardised, treating their users like supplicants, almost victims. Social mobility ground to a halt, the younger generation competing for fewer jobs and shut out of the housing market. 1/5 of children leaving primary school without achieving a basic level of numeracy or literacy. 10 million people lacking basic digital skills. So, the rapid pace of social economic change has left millions behind and they feel abandoned. So, as someone once said, are we not living in the best of times and the worst of times? For sure, the future direction we choose for our country will be decided by politics or the political sphere. But our system of government is failing people. Instead of sharing power, it hoards it. Those who make decisions on our behalf, whether they be in Westminster, Brussels, in business, the media, working in the public sector, are often too unaccountable. People feel powerless to contribute and make their voices heard. So, government has to change, and yet there will be more public spending cuts to come. So we literally cannot afford the status quo. Now, I believe that Labour, together with a wider orbit of social and progressive movements, will define and shape the political settlement of the coming decade. We defined, actually, the dominant political settlement of the 20th century. We built our welfare state. It was a profound achievement, but too often we settled for that. The ideology and the institutions of 70 years ago became the horizon of our ambition. Confronted by neoliberalism, the destructive capacity of that force, in the 80s we sometimes just defended institutions and ideas that were often offering diminishing returns. We became institutionally conservative, defending often the outdated. So, self-evidently, we will not build a new economy with the old politics of command and control. Central government, big bureaucracies and corporations faced with complexity and unpredictability are all losing the power they once had to shape our world. Our welfare state is ill-equipped to deal with modern social evils like loneliness, the loss of community, a sense of anomie, alienation. Our health service is struggling to cope with the rise of chronic illnesses like depression, obesity, diabetes, and we literally lack a proper system of care for our growing elderly population. So, our political parties cannot keep up with our complex and fast-changing society. In the new economy, politics will be about innovation and participation, about networks, not hierarchies. Parties will not win power in government. They'll have to create power by building partnerships and wider public involvement. Instead of imposing change on communities, politicians will need to use their insights and experience of what works and what doesn't. We'll be conveners, actually, bringing people together to help them find solutions to the problems they face. Now, these are insights that you are making here at the RSA, Matthew, in your excellent work around the power to create, and I really applaud it, and we're studying it very closely. Just as in the age of steam and the age of the railways, our new digital age is radically changing society. But while rail transformed society, it also created opportunities for the robber barons to monopolise and control it for their own good. We have to tackle concentrations of power and make sure people have the skills and the abilities to take advantage of the internet. In the vanguard of the new economy, there is a new productive force, which is the life of the mind. There are new kinds of raw materials, the intangible assets of information, sounds, words, images, ideas, and they're produced in creative, emotional, and intellectual labour. New modes of production are using consumers and their relationships in the co-inventing of new ideas, products, and actual cultural meaning itself. People no longer just want to consume the culture and the products handed to them from on high. Technology, from computer-aided design to the new 3D printing, will provide individuals with the means to actively create culture and pursue creative forms of labour. Individuals will be able to design and make the things they live with. So, to develop these opportunities throughout the population, we need an education system that actually nurtures and cultivates the full range of human capabilities. Our present model of education rewards conformity in pursuit of a narrow, logical and mathematical form of intelligence. It fails too many children and it reproduces the power of the already privileged. It is wasteful of our most important economic resource, which is actually our human ingenuity itself. We need to give craft and vocational work the same value and status as academic work, and prioritise digital inclusion to help adults who lack digital skills make the most of the internet. Now, the future represents a powerful challenge to my party. Historically, our instincts have too often been to centralise, to conform and to control. To shape the future of our country, we in Labour know that we have to do things very, very differently. It is literally about rethinking socialism. Now, I've always been ready to admit I'm on the more romantic and, dare I say, conservative side of socialism. The conservative radicalism of John Ruskin, the romanticism of William Morris, the ILP itself, George Lansbury, our greatest ever Labour leader, E.P. Thompson, one that values the local, the parochial and the magical as sources of political agency and power. Actually, Dylan Thomas once said, he said the Labour movement at its best was both magical and parochial. Its magic was derived from being anchored in the everyday tempo of the communities it sought to represent. Magical and parochial. We built our future on these patterns of the past. Labour's traditions lie in the popular movements of collective self-help and improvement, the temperance societies, holiday clubs, cooperatives, riding schools, the trade unions. Before we became the party of the state, we were a movement, developing leadership, organising people, creating power as a currency. Therefore, why don't we confront the future through these traditions? Own our own history. It was Chesterton who said, actually, that tradition is the democracy of the dead. We should own our own traditions and our history. That democracy of the labour movement, go back to it to chart the future. Put it this way, our values grew out of our religious roots, as Harold Wilson often said. So let me begin the new with the old. Luke 17, verses 20 to 21. The kingdom of God is not coming with signs to be observed, nor will they say, look, here it is. Or, there it is. For behold, the kingdom of God is within you. The power to change our lives lives deep within each and every one of us. The political theorist, Roberto Unger, makes this point. The institutions and structures we build make us who we are. But, as he says, they are finite and we are not. There is always more in us, more capability of insight, of production, of emotion, of association than there is in them. We are, says Unger, context-transcending spirits. Tonight's first political soundbite. I'm sure it will catch on. Now, the socialism for me is about this power within. This freedom to aspire and to find self-fulfillment is part of our modern consciousness. It is individual, but it is not selfish. It involves the right of everyone to achieve their own unique way of being human, to self-realise, self-actualise. To dispute this right in others is to fail to live within its own terms. And it is a mutual recognition that we're all dependent upon other people throughout our lives, not an atomised group of isolated, transacting individuals. We need one another to succeed individually. In our industrial society, solidarity called upon an underlying shared identity and a common economic interest. But it's no longer so effective in our diverse society of individuals. We need to create new models of interdependency. I would suggest reciprocity, which establishes a sense of justice in relationships. There was an old famous Jewish Hillel's Golden Rule, where a non-believer came up to Rabbi Hillel and said, we will convert to your religion if you can recite the scriptures, to which he just stood on one leg and just said, do not do unto others as they'd not have them do to you. The rest is commentary, he said. The rest is commentary. So do not do unto others as you'd not have them do to you. And a renewed idea of fraternity, which, unlike solidarity, recognises the diversity between equals. So, for me, these define a politics that is both radical and conservative, a mix of new and blue Labour, may I suggest. The socialism of the future will be out creating power together for individual freedom, a future worth making. Now, Labour's policy review has been working on a programme of national renewal in a time when there is no money to spare. Labour has been learning lessons from the past.